23.
Aerial 34.
A late October storm brought a heavy, wet snow. The customary hard freeze hadn't occurred, and the trees were still mostly leafed. By dawn, tens of thousands of snow-laden limbs had dropped. Across the metropolitan area, hundreds of streets were blocked, and nearly 100,000 residents were without electrical power and telephone service. As the hours passed, the extent of the damage continued to unfold. A less obvious casualty was the city's park system, especially the 100-year-old Grand Parks, whose thick population of large, mature trees was devastated. Designed more than a century ago by one of the nation's premier landscape architects, Omaha's park system was considered novel and forward-thinking, its design concepts a model to be emulated. The storm that threatened the heart of these parks was the catalyst for an immense effort of not only replacing the large number of damaged trees, but of restoring the vision that was so evident in their creation. The severity of the storm was soon answered by the community's resolve to dig out and clean up. Restoring power and phone service and clearing high-traffic areas and residential streets got the highest priority.
There was an incredible community effort that was pulled into action within hours from all of the folks in the city, county, and state governments. Emergency operations were well underway by 4:30 in the morning, and the citizens' response that whole next day, from Salvation Army to Red Cross to churches, was, again, the only word I can choose is incredible.
Thousands of volunteers signed up and were sent out to help. Trucks and equipment were donated by area businesses, and Army Reserve and National Guard troops joined the effort. Real progress was evident across the city, but the park system, especially the grand century-old parks, were still in very bad shape.
The week following that storm, as we had opportunity to go out and look at each of our parks, was really quite remarkable. That you would drive through Hanscom Park and see these large bur oaks literally strewn across the park. Traveling through the park was difficult, and the number of branches that were down on the ground was really quite disheartening.
Realizing the seriousness of the situation, an established friend of the park system came forward with much-needed support.
The first day back from work after this storm, I had received a phone call from Lynn Ziegenbein with the Peter Kiewit Foundation, and her first comment was, "Larry, what can we do to help?"
Our trustees, within, I would say, 18 to 36 hours, had had several conversations about how could the Peter Kiewit Foundation be helpful to our community. And they knew that this was the kind of a project that Mr. Kiewit, if he were here, would immediately have risen to the occasion and tried to address positively. And the trustees thought that how they could help the most would be to give some clear-cut aid.
Created by the late Peter Kiewit, the foundation bearing his name funds a wide spectrum of projects in the nonprofit community. An Omaha native who built his family's construction business into a major national firm, Peter Kiewit believed in returning his wealth to the people whose strong work ethic had allowed him to be so successful. With assets in excess of $500 million, the foundation trustees have followed Peter Kiewit's wishes by giving away nearly $300 million in the 20 years since his death. The Kiewit Foundation aid, city resources, and federal disaster funding provided Omaha with the means to clean up the damage. Once that was accomplished, Omaha was hit with tree planting fever. The Omaha World Herald newspaper initiated a joint effort with the city's public agencies, local nurseries, and educational specialists to help reforest Omaha. The multi-million-dollar effort pledged to plant 500,000 new trees. But without proper planning and guidance, this massive amount of tree planting could be a bigger disaster than the storm.
It was immediately apparent that to do this right, the critical piece of the puzzle for the parks was a really good planning process, so that we actually took this negative and turned it into a positive.
It was quite a large undertaking to begin to not look at one park, but hundreds and hundreds of acres of parks.
Serving a metropolitan area population exceeding 700,000, the city of Omaha operates a very large and diverse park and recreation system. More than 200 parks occupy 8,500 acres of land. Facilities include 9 public golf courses, nearly 20 swimming pools, 13 community centers, 3 ice skating rinks, and numerous tennis courts, soccer fields, and ball diamonds. The idea that was unfolding would be a massive effort, unlike anything the city had undertaken in the past. Comprehensive rehabilitation and restoration plans for the backbone of Omaha's park system, its grand old historic parks.
No city has ever attempted to do this. It's going to be incredibly expensive. It's going to need resources that are really beyond not only what we have internally, but almost beyond anybody that I knew of around nationally to be able to do those kinds of plans and turn them around in the time frame that we have.
Omaha has had a history of such a beautiful park system historically for the last 100 years. Why not look at how could we reinvigorate that same plan on some of those same park spaces that were so damaged? And that's when our plan to look at a comprehensive replanting of the parks was born.
The first step would be finding a landscape architectural firm that had the talent, resources, and the ability to produce a great deal of work very quickly. But perhaps the most important requirement was a solid understanding of the techniques and study needed to properly address landscape restoration in historic parks.
In the course of this whole project, everyone was reminded of Omaha's wonderful master park plan nearly 100 years ago, done by the landscape architect Cleveland.
H.W.S. Cleveland, who came in over 100 years ago and helped design our wonderful older city parks. And Lynn said to me one day, you know, we want to bring to the table in this huge effort a landscape firm with the prominence and the abilities that Cleveland had 100 years ago.
The search process was completed when the Denver office of Eckbo, Dean, Austin, and Williams, or EDAW, was selected.
EDAW is an internationally renowned firm and has many interesting projects to its credit worldwide. But we were interested in the EDAW team out of the Denver office, not only for the presentation they made, but also their experience in this part of the country.
EDAW is a large international design and planning firm. We've been in business for 60 years. We were selected to do this project because of our extensive park experience, our extensive park restoration experience, and our experience in dealing with historic parks and historic landscapes.
EDAW's skills of recognizing and incorporating the historical significance of projects would be very important if the century-old grand parks were to be restored. In the decade of the 1880s, Omaha experienced a tremendous boom. Its population grew from 30,000 to more than 100,000. The rapid growth and industrialization of the city became a major concern for a group of influential citizens. If Omaha was to grow beyond the stockyard and railroad center it had become, its image would need enhancing. An attractive system of parks would portray the city as progressive and civilized. This, in turn, would attract people and capital. Intense lobbying of the state legislature resulted in a statute giving Omaha the legal authority to establish a park commission. Taxation and bond issuance would provide funding to acquire and maintain park lands. In May of 1889, the first Board of Park Commissioners was formed. Its president was George L. Miller. Under his leadership, one of the board's initial actions was the commissioning of a landscape architect to design a park system for Omaha. In the second half of the 19th century, landscape architecture was a new discipline in the United States. Two of the very best were Frederick Law Olmsted and Horace William Shaler Cleveland. Olmsted is often credited with fathering the profession of landscape architecture in America. Among his many designs, the most famous is undoubtedly New York City's Central Park. Horace Cleveland and Frederick Law Olmsted collaborated on another landmark project, Brooklands Prospect Park. Both properties featured rolling terrain, curving pathways, pastoral bodies of water, and numerous tree plantings that provided a welcome respite from the growing urban sprawl. They were the first large public spaces in any American city designed exclusively for recreation. Back in Omaha, the Board of Park Commissioners hired Horace Cleveland, and in June of 1889, he presented his design principles to them. The design concepts and ideas he conveyed would firmly set the direction for park development in Omaha for many years.
Cleveland used natural terrain and actually created terrain in some respects to create interest and excitement and more pleasurable places and more aesthetic places to be in his parks.
To achieve the effects he sought, H.W.S. Cleveland used grading, substantial shrubbery and tree plantings, and pathways and roads that followed the natural contours of the terrain. The result was a series of truly spectacular parks.
Miller Park is perhaps the one that has the best of his signature still in place today. As you look at some of the large tree plantings, the lovely sycamores with the white bark against the dark evergreen tree plantings in that park, it's quite a statement of a drama for the park.
Cleveland's vision for Omaha's park system went well beyond the parks themselves. He strongly advocated the need for a series of parks connected by scenic boulevards. In his own words, making parks and boulevards integral portions of the city, instead of merely ornamental appendages.
His parks and parkway systems, boulevard systems, in fact, the whole idea of that, to link up parks in the city, was a stroke of genius. It's nice to have parks dotted around the community like they are, but quite another to link them all up.
As the city and EDAW began to address Omaha's devastated old parks, it became evident that developing meaningful plans on the scale needed would require active involvement from several groups of people.
As good as EDAW was, and we knew they would be, what they lacked was a good knowledge about our park system, how our parks work, and some of the history of our parks. So we hit on this idea of bringing together this task force that would work with EDAW.
When we really got down to organizing this project, the philosophy that we followed was everyone needs to be talking to everyone else and understanding what part of the project each one of us is bringing. And so Larry Foster really gets the credit for organizing us into a team approach, from the EDAW people to we at the Peter Kiewit Foundation to the city people.
right from the very beginning when we did our park tours, we split up into 3 different teams, and each team had park maintenance folks with them who were responsible for work in those specific parks. We toured them on golf carts, and they were extremely helpful in the depth of insight that they had about their particular park. These folks are really proud of what they do and where they do it, and they take a wonderful interest in all of those parks. And they were able to impart to us information that we would never have gotten any other way.
The design work began with the teams touring the various parks, collecting information, and seeing firsthand what needed to be done.
During those tours, we found facilities that needed improvements, entrances that needed improvements, circulation problems for pedestrians as well as vehicles that also needed improvement, and we determined some alternatives for solving those problems in the field.
Combining the insights gained through the park tours with the other available information provided EDAW with enough material to start the master plans.
We prepared the master plans utilizing some of the existing base data that the city had available. That included some very high quality aerial photos and also some very good GIS information, geographic information systems. We used that information, prepared hard copy base maps of the aerial photos, and then overlaid them with tracing paper and by hand drew the proposed improvements. We combined those two in a computer scan and were able to output those as pages of the booklet. All that information made the design process that much more accurate and beneficial, I think. We were able to see what was existing on the ground and then work with that in our plans. Many times with master plans, that much information is not available.
As EDAW developed the master plans, the design teams met regularly to review and discuss what was being proposed. Ideas presented by EDAW were dissected and evaluated.
Each new idea received some scrutiny. Some of the ideas got modified, some of the ideas got thrown out, and most of the ideas got incorporated into the plan.
In the course of producing the master plans, EDAW specified standard design elements and methods for use across the entire park system. These approaches include restoration of the urban forest, selective pruning and thinning, planting trees in depth, adding ground cover, and improving water body edges. As the planning process progressed, the design team and the Kiewit Foundation, inspired by Cleveland's philosophy of landscaped parkways and boulevards, expanded their scope to include a new project, the beautification of Abbott Drive. Heavily traveled and the main thoroughfare between Epley Airport and downtown Omaha, Abbott Drive presents the first view of the city for many. Ironically, Abbott's winding nature and its role of connecting one of Omaha's original parks, Levi Carter, with the extensive downtown and riverfront development, ideally reflect Cleveland's legendary design philosophy. Converting this traditional urban roadway to Cleveland's vision of landscaped beauty became a new challenge for the team.
Our intention on Abbott Drive was to create a boulevard that would connect the airfield with downtown Omaha, that would be a wonderful first impression for people arriving in the city, that would reflect the culture and history and wonderful environment that the city has.
The street trees that you'd find along both sides contribute to the corridor effect. And then at night, the decorative pedestrian scale lights that we've put in there in between the overhead parkway lights, street lights, will effectively look like a string of pearls coming into the community. It will lead you right into town. I think it's a think it's going to be a great entry corridor.
One of our trustees who does not live in Omaha, who comes and goes almost exclusively through Eppley Airfield, who constantly said, Peter Kiewit was so committed to downtown Omaha, don't you think we could do something to improve the front door, the first impression, and the farewell as people are leaving?
In an effort to re-image and to reposition our city as a world-class city of the 21st century, a good deal of that has to be in improving what people see, which has a lot to do with how they feel about our city.
Combining the team approach with EDAW's talents, skills, and experience has resulted in excellent plans with fine detail that are truly functional.
EDAW did a magnificent job for us. And like us, I think we learned together a little bit. I don't believe anybody had ever been called upon to do something on such a massive scale, so many different parks at the same time.
It's really been ideal, and it's something of a Midwestern model. There has been a minimum of territoriality. I can't even think of any examples right now to give you of that. I think it has been an excellent example of collaboration and cooperation among everyone.
Superb master plans do no one any good if they aren't used, and these were put to the test almost immediately. They were invaluable in keeping the Omaha City Council informed about the project, and in 1999, the new landscape plans guided the planting of $600,000 worth of new trees. The usefulness of the plans is only beginning.
To realize the full implementation of the scope of those plans would probably take 10 to 20 years to accomplish. They're long range, they're far thinking, they're everything that needs to be done in a park system of this scale. And they cover such a broad range and a broad perspective that they're a blueprint for the future.
We really kind of cut a mold, I think, in landscape planning that no one's ever had to do before. And they've done a great job, spent a lot of time here, and have done, I think, probably above and beyond what we really even called for them to do.
The partnership that was established between the Parks Department, Parks, Recreation, and Public Properties, the Kiewit Foundation, and ourselves, kind of a three-way partnership, has been a fantastic experience.
We're hoping that by setting this kind of an example and by doing this sort of work that indeed it will endure, it will improve, maintain, or sustain the quality of life in Omaha.
The re-landscaping planning, I think, is just going to be something that this park department is going to be using for many, many years. And in 50 years, I believe that people will look back and they'll remember this October storm, and they may even talk about the 4 or 5 years that followed that and the city's ability to move our parks, to nudge them back to this idea that parks ought to be something that the landscape really kind of drives the design.
A century later, contemporary landscape architects still hold H.W.S. Cleveland's methods of creating pleasurable, relaxing, and aesthetic places in high regard. Through them, his vision continues.
As EDAW went through and looked at these large spaces and boulevards, they immediately recognized the value of that grandeur that Cleveland had in mind.
In looking at the historic parks in Omaha, we found many remnants of the original design. There are large groves of evergreen trees, for instance, that were a signature of many of Cleveland's designs. Our design approach was to maintain, improve, and restore those specific elements that were originally designed into the parks.
It's an interesting thought about what would Cleveland think about this work. I think he would be pleased. Hopefully he would even be proud to think that what he had started 100 years ago had not only taken hold and flourished, but that people still cared about what he had done enough to research his way of doing things and trying to keep up his tradition. I think he would be proud.